Hi there, Rick Ragoza here on another series on mastering the guitar. As we started this, the main focus and the main part of education is not so much what notes you play for fun and all that, but the approach and how you're attempting to play the instrument. The helpful advice that I can give from some 20 years I've been playing and teaching is that it's important that you don't do things that are unmonitored. It's common knowledge that you're training your system to respond, so your practice time's very important as a focus point, because what you practice in one way or another is going to affect not only your ability to play, but what you're going to play in a live situation. Whether that be in front of a few people watching you play, or if it might be on stage playing with a band or whatever the story is. Some of the breakdowns of those principles are, first off, for you, of those of you out there that haven't played before or are just learning to play, it's important that you learn how to move your fingers independently. Without that kind of control, it's going to be very difficult to be playing certain lead lines or chords when your fingers all have a different place to go and need to, in fact, with some chord changes, they move pretty fast, respond to different chord forms without having a minimal, at least a minimal amount of dexterity already starting to, and this you know, you advance as you go, but it's important that you adhere to the certain foundational principles that help establish a good solid foundation, because without that, it's kind of scattershots as you play. And so as a player and a learner and as a student, you should think about each one of your practice sessions that shouldn't exist more than 10 minutes or so that you can get a quick warm-up, expose yourself to the instrument, and then let that information be stored in your memory banks, retained for a later date. And even if you have a half-hour break and go back for 10 minutes, you'll find a few of those, or 2 or 3 a day, or however you can schedule it in your, will be much better for you than if you just sat down for half an hour and hope that you remember all the things that you were practicing and trying to learn. So it's important that in this series we've been focusing on finger exercises. You can invent some of your own, but it's very important that you even, like for example, be disciplined and determined, but that you change the patterns. You know, try 2, 3, 1, 4, 2, 3, 1, 4, okay? And try this as you're watching this. 1, 3, 2, 4, okay? Now you can keep your fingers apart and then join them together. 1, 3, 2, 4, 1, 3, 2, 4, as if you were plucking with the right hand and applying pressure with the left. You can keep your fingers together or your whole hand together. Practice moving them back and forth, okay, independently. All right, from 1 to 4. And trying to maybe even alternate between sets, okay? It's very important that you get the dexterity and start conditioning the forearms. Closed fist, open up, okay? Slowly stretch the fingers, bring them in again. And these drills are certified drills. In fact, some of the finger exercises are used by specialists all over the world. Optometrists, brain surgeons, they all have to go through a regimented program to develop dexterity. And let's face it, you wouldn't want someone operating on your brain and then all of a sudden have a little nerve spasm. And that's no different than when you're playing the instrument. At certain times, there's quite a requirement of control necessary to play. If you think of bands like Yes and some of these bands that are just really intense, there's no way that you can fake that. And so that type of training and control has to come from just diligent practice over the years. And the idea of this is that we can attain the goals that we're trying to achieve, and we don't really necessarily have to worry about hoping that it happens. You can have a planned schedule and you'll attain this this ability to play the instrument. So we start off with some drills. What I encourage you always to do is start with a basic exercise number 1, just position playing, where your 4 fingers correlate to any 4 frets on the guitar, whatever it might be. 3rd position, or 5th position, or 1st position. The 4 frets will work together. In the 3rd position, take the fingers on and off a few times, just to warm up, you know. Get it clear what the basic movement area is going to be. You know, 1 finger up on the string at a time, 1, 2, 3, 4. And it's not necessary that the other fingers move unless they're assigned to move. So it's very important that you become disciplined in that and try to eliminate. In fact, most of the playing, even I've met accomplished players, most of the refining in playing and the focus is eliminating motion. You see these players and they're doing one note. They're playing one note and their hands are moving and their thumbs up. Well, that isn't necessary. You can keep a solid foundation and play that one note without excess motion. Let's face it, the less energy you spend doing the one note, the more you have for all the other notes that you're going to be planning to play. Okay? Now the basic drill, number 1, covers a 4-fret area. And a part of the reason that it's appropriate for us is the major scale that we learn, this instrument being a diatonic instrument, tuned to basically, it's chromatic, meaning that there are half-step intervals, white, white, black, white on the piano, but diatonic meaning that the notes that are on here at certain positions are the white keys on the piano, okay, diatonic or major. So it only seems natural that that's the first scale that you should learn because that's the basic scale that's used for the tuning, okay? And we started on tuning in the last episode, and occasionally we're going to get into that. I'd encourage you to use a videotape and copy these, get it down. What I'll do quickly for you is just run through the open strings and get a tape so that right now you just watch the tape, but later on you can play it back and try to tune your instrument. It's important that you don't tune your instrument too high, so you always go lower and then try to tune up, okay? And here's an E top string. Here's an A. There's a D. There's a G. There's a B. And there we are, back to an E again, okay? It's very important that you go slow and you try to hear that relationship, because as far as numbers and how I'll be able to reveal some of the numbers to you in the process of thinking involved with understanding theory, is that these are tuned in accordance with the one prior to it, and in fact, for the most part, it's fourths. A is 4 letters away from E, and it goes down that way, a fourth, a fourth, a fourth. There's an exception between the 3rd and 2nd string, which is a minor third, they call that, and then back to a fourth between the 2nd string and the 1st string. Okay? So keep that in mind. You just want to be able to just get a general guide, and then you tune the instrument to itself. Okay? And we're going to occasionally, I'm just going to bring that up again about the 5th fret tuning. Later on we'll get into harmonics. And at this point in stage of the game, it's not so important that your guitar's, it's better if it is. If you know someone who can tune it for you, that'd be great. And if you, you know, experiment yourself, be careful not to turn up or crank the pegs, because you just break strings and it just costs you. So don't really torque on this or get too anxious. If you're not sure, it's always easier to go back, tune the top string lower, and then tune the rest of the strings according to that. Okay? Now let's get right into the major scale, because that's the most important scale. And at this point, I may as well just bring it up that you can mail in your requests. There's going to be paperwork available. It was very tough to try to figure out, well, what should we do here? Should we get a chalkboard and just illustrate these things? And it just seems that it's best if you want to send a self-addressed, self-stamped envelope that we can send it back to you, that's fine. If not, just let us know and we'll send the material back to you. And the whole focus of this whole program is just to be of assistance and to help those of you that or it's not possible to take lessons or any of those kind of things, that here's some instruction available to you. Okay? The box is 369, and that's Squamish, and you can send it to Community 10 and put Mastering the Guitar on the envelope, so that we'll know down here where it's, you know, supposed to be sent and who's going to deal with that. All right? So the major scale now is going to be based on position playing. So what I could have you do is isolate your hands. We're going to be playing in the key of G just for now. So what that means is you're in the 2nd position, okay, and start on the top string, so that your 2nd finger is going to start on the 3rd fret. 1, 2, 3, okay? Now what I'm going to do is narrate the numbers of the fingers that play on each string. That's one of the easy ways to remember this. And it's important as a rule, or little things like guidelines, is that each finger has its own area to play in, okay? So you could look at them like neighbors that don't play in each other's yard unless you have permission. So for the most part, each finger, when their number's called, is going to be playing within the perimeters of that fret, whether it's the 4th finger or 1st, okay? It's important to just keep that simple rule, and you can't go wrong, all right? So carrying on with this, starting on the top string, we start with 2 in the 3rd fret. Now the numeric pattern is going to be this: 2, 4, okay? The next string is 1, 2, 4. The next string, 1, 3, 4. Okay? The next string is repeated again. 1, 3, 4. Now on the second string, it's 2, 4. And on the first string, it's 1, 2. And to complete the position, 4 can be included in that, even though the second finger is the root note or the key that we're playing in, the G. Okay? Now let's go backwards, and again, as you become more familiar with this, you pick up on it. So don't worry if that was a little fast, you'll catch it. Okay? It's not that big of a deal. If you can remember phone numbers, you have the aptitude necessary to remember basic major scale, because there are only 7 different letters. Okay? Now going back, we've got 2, 1, 4, 2, next string, 4, 3, 1, then again 4, 3, 1, then on the fifth string 4, 2, 1, and on the top string 4, 2. Okay? Now basically, getting this so that we can hear what we're doing, okay? We've got a 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 3, 4. And that's the word octave, which is Latin for 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The solfeggio system is do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Okay? For those of you out there who want to play and sing at the same time, start practicing and training your ear to make the sounds that you're playing. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Okay? Okay? So, strum the note, la, 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 and the next note, la, 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 la. And in fact, singing, we won't get into that, in the near future, but later on, perhaps, we can get into some recommended advice. It's important to keep your stomach tense when you're singing, da, 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 and practice on little spurts of air. And as you get a little bit more strength and conditioned muscles in it's called diaphragmatic costal breathing. When you get a little bit more control on that, you'll find yourself being able to sustain those notes. Da, 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 okay? Now, the octave, which means the register of 8, can be repeated again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, okay? So this position is what you can refer to as a 2-octave scale, starting from the G, it plays all the way up to the G, and then from this G all the way up to a higher G, which covers 2 octaves. And in certain keys, in the key of E, for example, you can get a range of approximately 4 octaves, depending on how many frets that you can go up to. If you don't have it, you can always hit that high harmonic. And that's a 4-octave range, which is pretty much the extended range of the guitar. It's about all you're going to get out of it. Okay? Now, for those of you who have taken lessons before, who have some of this information down, it might not hurt to get a notebook and start writing some of this down also, so that you have your own personal log, because this information is sequential, meaning that we grow and develop off of the information already covered. So it's important that you don't miss anything, so you keep a log of what's going on, and then if you missed some of these sequences, you can put them in at a later date and you've got the big picture. Eventually you'll have some of the fundamental principles in understanding theory and how to relate to the instrument. Now, I refer a lot to a process of thinking, and it's so important, and through the years that I've been literally helping people learn how to play the guitar and learning it myself, I've had to use a process or an approach, a certain principle of approach. And in regards to defining this process of thinking, there's some things or certain things that you need to know. Foremost is you need to know the key that you're playing in. The music alphabet consists of 7 different letters. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Okay? Now those letters are the only letters used in music. You might see A flat or A sharp, but still the bottom line is those 7 letters are the only letters of the alphabet that are used. They're repeated, they're going around. Well, you need to know how to apply a process of thinking or some principles in that so that you know where you stand at any given moment. How the numbers relate to the keys is that the key that you're in, you always start with a 1. For example, if we're in the key of C, your root note or starting note is the C note. And once you find the C note, then every note that you play from the major scale is relative to that starting note. Okay, C is 1, D is 2, E is 3, F is 4, G is 5, okay? A is 6, B is 7, and then we get that octave, that Latin word for 8, okay? And this is the whole key and starting key principles in understanding everything that happens on this instrument. All the forms of chords and harmony structures, the overtone series, all relate back to a fundamental understanding of the diatonic pattern, the major scale, okay? So now looking at that and explaining it a little bit more in depth as we just go through this one step at a time. We've looked at the major scale and we're starting to relate to the numbers. How we could sort of, test your recall is be able to understand what a third is. A third means that when we establish our root note, in this case it's C, okay? Well, a third means that I play the third note of that scale. 1, 2, 3. Okay? So this in broken arpeggiated form is 1, 3. Okay? Now I can play a third off of each note of the scale. And what that means is I'm playing every other note, and then I go back one and play the other note, alternating those notes. 1, 3, 2, 4, 3, 5, okay? 4, 6, 5, 7. We won't get too much into it now because I don't want to confuse you, but say for example we come up to 8, well the next note, is that a 9, 10, 11? How do you work that? And when we're getting into harmony and more advanced harmony and structuring chords, we would look at that as a 9th or a 10th. 10ths aren't very common. 11th or 16, okay? It also can be referred to as starting over. So once we get up to the C, then the next note can be considered a 2 again. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So each octave register can be considered 1 to 8, okay? And at this stage of the game, for simplicity forms, I would encourage you to start getting used to that, 1 to 8. And the sooner you do, the sooner you'll be picking up the basic chords, because all the chords that exist come either directly or some form, an exception to the scale, okay? Because you need to have a process of thinking, and it's already been established for us. Theory is already laid out. It's broken down to various keys, okay? If we were, for example, in the key of A, we would start on an A note. And then we would go through the sequence. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And this is the neat thing as you develop a relationship with the instrument, because each time we apply to a different position, the pattern's the same. Changing the key means that we simply change the location or starting point that we're playing on. Okay? Now, how some of this information starts branching out to harmony and chords. Standard blues, gospel, a lot of country, rock, Creedence Clearwater they just used a number of different approaches, but they were primarily using what a cadence is a structured harmony, what they call a 1-4-5. And those of you who have taken lessons or have caught some of this information before, you know this is going to perk up your recall or your memory. 1-4-5 is a standard cadence. In the last 50 years, we've used about 8 different cadences. So all the music that you're hearing on the radio and your favorite tunes are within the perimeters of approximately about 8 different structured cadences. The type of old 60s. Okay? Well, that was what you could call a 1-6-4-5. All right? In the type of jazz settings, we got things like that cadence is basically, you hear a lot in turnarounds, is a 2, 5, 1. And so what I'm doing is I'm taking the major scale and using the numbers as guidelines and actual pivot points, okay? Where I have my key and my root note is established. 1, the root note, okay? Then I would count through the scale, including the root note, because the root note is a number in itself. So don't get into the classic mistake, which I've seen before and many have. that you start in the next note as 1. No, 1 occupies the root note, okay? So we've got 1, 2, 3. If we're learning a 4 or 5 cadence, we isolate the 4th and the 5th. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, okay? And it's neat the way the music works because 5 is 2 frets after 4, okay? Now, if we know where a 2 is, 3 is just right after 2. So it's kind of weird, and you think it's simple at first, but if you think about it, and I've seen people complicate it and they get lost themselves. It is very basic, and it's a part of what motivates me, because a lot more people could appreciate music and it could be a joy to your life if you just were explained a very simple way in how to understand it. So numbers have proven to be that over the last 20 years that I've been experiencing the development and exposure to the instrument, because the numbers, they never lie and they're always there, okay? If I know where my 1 is, I can always figure out where my 3rd is, or my 4th, or my 5th, okay? Now, you may think, well, what do I need to know that for? Well, for example, if we were going to be playing in a rock format and you needed to play like a rock chord, now who hasn't heard that sound? Okay, well, what I'm doing there is I'm playing my root note and a 5th, and then I'm alternating between the 6, and I'm just using that as a basic chord. Root, 5th, rock chord. I call them rock chords. Right? And there's so many variations. Okay? And that, I could say, hold your finger here, make these sounds. All right? And that might be fine for some. Most, and personally, I found it easier to equip the student with the information necessary, and he can go and learn whatever song that he wants to, and I don't have to learn the material or spend a lot of wasted time. Equipping you with the tools is what's important, because you might not like to play the same music that I do, but it's the same information that's underlying all of it, okay? Understanding keys and how they relate to one another, and understanding how the chords are built is the whole, whether it's jazz, country, rock, blues, it's all the same. And you just apply the theories or the formulas to the particular style that you're trying to play, and it becomes very simple. If we want to play a jazz type of sound, well, then you can lean towards certain notes. If you want a country type of sound, you can learn to play certain notes that give you a country kind of sound. Same thing with jazz. Getting kind of the flavor melody. There's certain notes that lend themselves to making jazz sounds. And how we can equip you with that is first showing you the major scale and then which notes do that. Okay? So now, to kind of get a ballpark of what's been happening here, we've got a major scale of 7 different notes. Okay? Each one of those has a relationship to the other. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay? Each one of those numbers, relative to the other, is very important in making certain sounds or impressions. Jazz impressions, country impressions, okay? It's first important to know the scale, get it down. And then we can start getting into isolating the certain notes that are used for what we're doing or what we're trying to play. All the chords that exist, okay, the basic open chords, all come back down to knowing a formula on how they're built. And what I'll start right now is introducing the families. There's 5, count them, 5 basic families: major, minor, augmented, diminished, and dominant 7th series. Each one of these is a formula unto itself, and it's different than the other. And they're all derived from the form of the major scale. All the chords that you have heard and will ever hear are one form or another based off of a triad. Now, it could be a really weird, stretching, really colored voicing, but at the same time, it was still based off of one of the formulas. It fits in the perimeters of one of the families. So when you can equip yourself with the basics of these families or triads, then the mystery is completely gone, first off, of what the chords are. Plus, it also equips you with the information when you want to learn how to play music from your favorite band. You start listening to it and you go, yeah, well, there could be only 5 chords he's playing at any one time. Which one is he playing on? And once you've isolated that, then it becomes even easier, because then there are certain chords that occupy the certain numbers in relation to major and minor that even help equip you with certain prereq information that give us what we need to know. If that guy's playing right now a root chord, and he's kind of in a rock setting, he probably will be going to a 4 chord, or maybe a 5 chord. There's so many variations. Okay? Now, it doesn't mean he has to play them in any particular order. What we're learning here is how to isolate them and how to make sense of why the notes are the way that they are, named on the neck, as well as how they relate to each other, and how basic chords, it really does make sense when you get the number system down in your thinking, your process of thinking. A recap is that whatever key you're in, you start on that root note. It's very important that you understand that. If we're in the key of C, you start on the C note. If we're in the key of F, you start on an F note. And then A, B, C become relative to your root note. In later sessions, we're going to break down basically what a triad is and how chords are constructed. And this information is necessary because once you get the tools, you can just figure it out yourself. A lot of times I've answered questions by simply sharing the formula. You go home, the formula's there, figure it out. And in fact, you not only learn better how to do this, but you realize that just by having, it's like computers, just by having the necessary information can make all the world of difference in how you apply it. Okay? If you don't have that information, it can be quite a struggle and very frustrating, and even suicidal, because it's just you can't get anywhere unless you have that open door. How it applies to chords, we'll get into in the next session, dealing with actually what a triad is and how it is applied, either in broken form or in chord form. So just in closing, I'd like to share basically another little exercise here, dealing with sets. Like, why don't you try to separate 1 and 3, 2 and 4, okay? 1 and 3, 2 and 4. Try them at the same time, or just alternate between them. 1, 3, 1, 3, 2, 4, 2, 4, okay? Some of you might think it's silly. You guys can do whatever you want with that. For those of you who want to learn how to play the instrument, make this your primal focus. This should be a very important part of your daily schedule, is figuring out at certain times of working in some finger exercises. And you can get the thumb in on it, okay? Doing your basic drills, whatever sequence. The important thing to understand is that you're disciplined, and it's not a sporadic mind spasm. It's determined motion. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's very deliberate. It's not accidental by any means, okay? And anything on the instrument isn't accidental. And by learning this information and applying it, it alleviates the guesswork and the occasional accidents that happen. Some of them might work in your favor, but trust me, most of the time it just gets in the way. We want to eliminate waste of space, waste of energy, and all the noise that goes with it. Okay? So remember that you can send your requests and feedback to Community 10, Mastering the Guitar, Box 369, Squamish, BC. Okay, hope you enjoyed it, and we'll catch you next time on Mastering the Guitar.